My name is Marc Sewtz. I'm the development manager for Oracle Apex. Anyone here heard about Apex before? Are you all familiar with it? How many do you know Apex? Okay, maybe half of you. Okay, great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Apex is, what you can do with it, but my presentation is about building web applications based on a variety of different data sources. I want to combine data that's local in your database, combine that with data that might be coming from spreadsheet, and then also include data coming from web services, from REST APIs, and integrate real-time live data feeds into my applications. Again, just a few words about me. I started with Oracle in Germany in '98. A year later, I moved to New York. I'm still in New York. I used to be in consulting, and in 2002, I transferred into the Oracle Apex development team. I've been in that team ever since, and I manage the development and delivery of Apex. If you're new to Apex, take a look at the ORCL Apex hashtag on Twitter. Everything that's happening in the Apex community is typically tweeted there. And of course, you're welcome to follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm going to maybe touch on a few new products. For the most part, I'm going to talk about existing versions of Apex and the Oracle database, but if anything new pops up, that's where our safe harbor statement comes in. All right, so before I get started with the technical stuff, let's talk about what problem I'm actually trying to solve in my presentation. So like I touched on in the beginning, I want to combine different data sources. I want to combine data that I'm already having in my Oracle database. I'm running a VM on my laptop. I have an Oracle Enterprise database installed here, and I already have some data. And I want to combine that data with data from a spreadsheet, stuff that's floating around, data that's being emailed around. I want to take that data, bring it into Oracle, and use that for my application as well. And then lastly, in the upper left-hand corner, I want to include real-time data from REST APIs, data coming from other cloud providers, other data providers. Just to make that a little bit more, more concrete, I kind of thought up an example that, I can relate to. I live in New York City. I have two kids in school. This fall, we're going to make a decision on middle schools and high schools. So I wanted to use that as an example to kind of illustrate a little bit better what I'm trying to build. So in my Oracle database, I have a directory of New York City schools. I have a spreadsheet with survey results, what parents think of all these different schools. And then I'm going to connect to a real-time open data API provided by the City of New York that provides me with most recent test results, math and English test results. So of course, that's just my personal example. It could be any kind of data sources, but just to make it a little bit more relatable, I want to build this kind of application, and then I want to use that to make a decision on what kind of school I want to pick. All right, so what are you going to take away from this presentation? We're going to touch on Apex and low-code development, what it is and what you can do with Apex. We're going to talk about building responsive web applications on the Oracle database. We're going to see how you can upload spreadsheets into the Oracle database. And then last, we're going to learn how you can interface with REST data APIs, in this case, public open data APIs. All right. So if there's one thing I'd like you to take away from this, it's apex.oracle.com. That's our free hosted site. And it's also the website where you can read up on Apex a lot more. So apex.oracle.com. This is our website. It talks about what Apex is, what you can do, what low-code development means, what kind of solutions you can build. We'll have lots of links to our community, customer references, quotes. So great place for you to learn more about Apex. And when you click here on Get Started, big blue button, then this talks about how you get your own environment. I'm going to do my demo today on apex.oracle.com. And you can get a free workspace there as well and do the exact same thing yourself. You just put in your name, your email, go through the wizard, you get a free workspace, and you can keep that workspace and learn more about Apex. All right, now let's get started. So my agenda, I'm going to talk about low-code development just a little bit, talk about Apex, then I'm going to talk about open data data sources, the kind of data that's available out there, and ways for you to get started working with these APIs. And then lastly, how you can bring them back into your application and use that data for your own applications. All right, here's a quote from Forrester that defines what low-code, I guess, in general means. Low-code platforms enable rapid delivery of business applications with a minimum of hand coding and less upfront investment in setup, training, and deployment. So the key here is the minimum of hand coding. We want to help you build your applications quickly without having to learn complex languages, a complex stack. We want to help you just to kind of essentially use declarative wizards to build apps. And here's a quote from Steve Jobs 20 years ago that I like. I'm not going to read everything, but the point here is the goal is to eliminate all that code that's redundant, that's repetitive, that's common across all the different apps, and just allow you to focus on the 20% or so of code that actually adds value to your business and that's unique to what you're trying to build. There are a number of tools out there that kind of fit in that space that provide easy declarative low-code development. Microsoft, Google, Salesforce, they all have tools in that space. Oracle even has another one, VPCS, Visual Builder Cloud Service, which allows you to declaratively build JavaScript applications on REST APIs. And up here we have Apex, and I'm going to talk about that more. At the other end of the spectrum, you have high control platforms, JavaScript, Java, .NET, and such, that require a lot more manual coding. Now with Apex, you get an all-inclusive IDE. Apex runs in a web browser, so all you need is your Safari or Chrome, any kind of web browser to use your IDE, build your applications, deploy your applications, run them. Apex is available on the Oracle Cloud. On premises, it runs, or it's shipped with the Oracle database. So wherever you run an Oracle database, you already are fully licensed to use Apex. You can run Apex on your standard or enterprise edition. It's also included with Oracle XE. Gerald talked about Oracle XE in the morning. We just released an up-to-date version of XE, which also includes Apex. And Apex also runs on other clouds. So you can run Apex on Amazon or many other hosting providers. And of course, you can set up your own Apex environment, installing an Oracle database and Apex. In general, you build web applications to visualize and manage data. Apex is built into the database, so you can directly take advantage of all the capabilities of the Oracle database. And it's relatively easy to learn and develop with Apex. Now here's some use cases that our customers use Apex for. Rapid application development, just a kind of general term. They are filling gaps in corporate systems, meaning ERP, CRM software, Oracle e-business suite, Fusion apps. Customers are using Apex to extend these kind of environments and build their own modules. Another popular use case is modernization of legacy systems, meaning if you have an Oracle Forms application, maybe Microsoft Access, or anything that is due for modernization, you can use Apex to build a new modern web app. Lots of customers also use Apex to just simply replace spreadsheets, uploading spreadsheets like I'm going to demo in a moment, and building a web application. And then at the other end, large mission-critical applications, you can easily scale Apex up to large-scale applications. One example is shop.oracle.com. That's our Oracle online store that's based on Apex. And a few words on the architecture. Apex is built into the database. Over here, the Apex engine sits right next to your SQL and PL SQL execution engines and your database schemas. So we are directly in the database, meaning there's zero latency between your apps and the underlying data. So Apex is very fast. In the middle tier, you have Oracle REST Data Services. Oracle REST Data Services directs your browser requests to the database, receives back the HTML, and then serves up JavaScript images and style sheets. Oracle REST Data Service is also used to serve up REST APIs. So with Apex and ORTS, you can very easily enable REST APIs on your existing tables and database objects. All right, let's take a look at what it actually looks like. All right, so again, I'm on apex.oracle.com. So once you have a workspace created, you just log in with your developer account. And then this is what our IDE looks like. There are 4 main components: application builder, SQL workshop, team development, and app gallery. If you're just getting started, take a look at the gallery, because there you'll find lots of sample applications and productivity applications to learn from. There's SQL workshop. SQL workshop is what you use to look into the Oracle database to see what objects you have, maybe create new objects, maybe load data, maybe run SQL scripts. What I want to show you here is in the object browser, the data that I already have. I have like a directory of New York City middle schools. And there's the actual data. I also have a directory of high schools, again, with the corresponding data already loaded. So it's a good starting point for my little project here. But of course, right now it's just tables that I would access through SQL, which isn't very user-friendly. So in order to build an application, I'm going to use the Create Application Wizard, which you'll find here in the App Builder. And then we're going to start this. So now you have a choice. You want to build a new application. It's going to be a web application. It's going to be responsive. It's going to run on desktop and mobile. But you can pick what kind of application you want to build. You can start from scratch, new application. You can start from a file, upload a spreadsheet, Excel file, or you can install one of our productivity applications. I'm going to do a new application. I'm going to call this Oracle Code Demo. I now have some choices here, what kind of UI I want, what kind of appearance. I like it red. And then I can choose some features to include, and I can add new pages. So by default, I'm already getting a home page, but I do want to add a report page on my school directory. Let's say middle schools. And you've seen my tables before, so I'm now going to pick my middle school table from my database. And there are some lookup tables here, so I know that, for example, there's a borough and there's a neighborhood that have foreign keys, so I can very easily pick these in here. And once I'm done, I'm going to add this page. And that should be enough for now, so I'm going to create my application. So what happens now is that Apex builds out this application for me, along with a login page and authentication schemes and a home page and a report page. And all of this is written into metadata inside the Oracle database. And then when I run the application, it just serves up the app. I'm going to log in. And here you have a choice. I'm just using my developer account, but you can also configure social authentication, for example, if you want to have like a Google or Facebook or LinkedIn sign-in. That's possible too. All right, that's how a typical Apex application looks like. You have a home page. You have a menu here on the left-hand side. You can collapse it and expand it. And you can drill down to your middle school directory. All right. That looks good. It's not very readable, so let's make a few modifications. I think the overview is a little bit too big, so I'm going to show this differently. That's already a little bit better. So now I can see what the school name is, the address, telephone number. I can see what subways and buses go there. So I get a pretty good idea of the schools. I can learn about the school days, how long they are, the zip codes. So I can go in and see what's in my actual zip code, which is 11215. All right. So that's very nice. So I have 4 middle schools that I would consider because they're close by, but I don't really find much information about the quality of those schools, how many school children or how they kind of perform. So that's the kind of information that I will get from a different source. So that was just building a very, very simple, small application. I'm now going to fast forward a little bit because I built this out with high schools and with some additional bells and whistles. And that's my application over here. And I ran this before, so let me try this again. So same thing as before. I included a few more things, and if you're interested, you can actually try this out yourself. Everything that I'm doing here is on apexoracle.com. It's out on the web. It's all live. So if you want to follow along with your phone or your tablet or laptop, or do it later, there's bit.ly/oracle_code_Rome. I also have that up here. You can just log in with demo and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so once again, they are my middle schools. Now I kind of formatted it a little bit nicer, and I added links here to look at some additional information. And then I did the same thing for my high schools. All right, so it's prettier, it's nicer, it's more readable, but it still doesn't really provide me all the information I need to really make a decision. So next I want to include another data source. I know that I have some spreadsheets floating around with some valuable information. I want to upload that and link it into this app. So this is my spreadsheet. All right. So what I have here is a spreadsheet with all the New York City schools and with ratings. Collaborative teacher score, effective school leadership, rigorous instructions, support environment. So all the kind of information that might be useful for me to make a decision. All right, that looks good. Now I want to take this data, load it into my database, and then map it to my existing school directory. So for that, I'm going to go back to SQL Workshop. And in SQL Workshop, we have a data load wizard, data workshop. And with this wizard, I can load data. And I have a number of different options. I can upload a file. I can drag and drop a file in here. Let's try that. Let's take this. It's an XLSX file. Come on. And now it gets uploaded. And we analyze the data structure. And that looks pretty good to me. All right. Let's try to load this. NYC. Let's call this survey. And then hit load. And now the wizard is uploading the spreadsheet into my database. It's processing all the rows. And now I have 3,250 rows loaded. So when I click here on View Table, I can see what just happened. And what happened is that I have a new table, NYCS survey. That's all the data, table structure. And clicking on data shows me pretty much the same information that I've seen in my spreadsheet. All right, so now I have this information in the database. Now I want to link this back into my application. So I'm going to run this again. I'm going to go back here to middle schools. And now I want to enhance this report with the survey data. So I'm going to click on Edit Page. This takes me into the Page Designer. The Page Designer is our development IDE for Apex. I'm going to click here on middle schools. And when you look at this IDE, you see like all the different regions in my page. Here on the left-hand side, you have the components. Right now, I only have breadcrumbs in my middle school region. And here on the right-hand side, you have the property editor that shows you all the properties available with this region. The most important piece here is that SQL query. So this is the SQL query that Apex generated for me when I went through this initial wizard. Now I want to modify this query and link in the information from my survey. There are a number of different ways I could go about it. I could use another declarative wizard and just point and click. I can just start typing, or I could just copy and paste some information that I prepared, because I don't want to type all of this. So what that's doing is it's going to link in information from that spreadsheet, right? It's going to link in the trust score, collaborative teacher score, effective school leadership, and so on from this NYCS survey table. Let's validate this. All right, looks good. I'm going to hit OK. Going to hit save. I'm going to run this. All right, so now I have my school information here on the left. I can still click on things and read up on the information here. But now I also have this information here on the right. I have all the different ratings. So now I could go back in, and let's say, where's my zip code? Disappeared. This is what we call an interactive report. You can always show and hide information. So I'm going to bring my zip code back in here, because I want to look for just my schools. And now I get some information about those 4 specific schools in my neighborhood. So the closer to 5, the better. So I think I might gonna go with this one here, New Voices. All right, I can also do some basic data analysis now. I can use, for example, our charting capabilities to draw a very simple chart on how many schools there are in each borough. There you go. So there are 142 schools in Brooklyn. All right, lots to choose from. I can also make some additional selections. Let's go back to this one here. I'm going to put the post zip code back in. And now I want to see how these schools rank. So I'm going to do a bar chart on the school name, and I want to see the effective school leadership score and just the full value. Okay. So based on that, I think I'm going to go with that green one here. All right, so that helps me a little bit making my decisions. But really what I'm after is test results, like real-time data that, in this case, the City of New York provides, test results of recent math and English tests. So let's talk about how I can interface with REST APIs. So first, open data. That's, I guess, the general term for what I'm trying to interface with. Lots of cities and states in the United States and all around the world make data available, stuff like crime data, statistics, school data, building permits, demographics, anything that a city does these days is, in many cases, made available online. Many cities just provide CSV data, spreadsheets maybe. What I'm primarily interested in is a REST API providing JSON data, because that's very easy to integrate into Apex. You know, the benefit of having this data available for cities and states, they are going to be more accountable and transparent. And for developers or just regular citizens, it's just a very good data source to kind of build solutions around. So here's one example, New York City open data. There are over 2,000 public data sets available. I have this open here somewhere. So here you can just look for anything. Let's say school. And then this takes you to a directory of all the different data sets available for schools. When you look at any specific one, then you get a description of what kind of data is available, how it's structured. Let's fast forward that. It looks like this. So it tells you how frequently it's being updated, how many rows, what kind of data structures behind it, and then it shows you the actual data. Right, so that's how an API or how an open data source could look like. But what do we get out of it, right? Like what the City of New York in this case provides is a web-based data viewer where I can go and look at the data. But what's really making it interesting for me is that little thing up here, the REST API. I can just copy the thing, plug it in my browser, and look at the JSON data feed of all the recent test results. It's a little bit hard to read, but it's there, it's available for me, and I can integrate that into my application. My slides are going to be online on the Oracle Code website, so if you want to look at some of these examples later. I built a few interesting examples in the past. For example, there's an Apex app that I built on New York City traffic violations, which is kind of fun to look at. I built an application on City of Chicago payroll data. That's like every employee working for the City of Chicago, the mayor, policemen, firemen, teachers. They're all in one JSON REST API, and you can look up all their salaries and do some analysis and aggregations on that. Another example is San Francisco. I built an application at Open World last year on San Francisco property data to just kind of highlight some of the current real estate prices there. And just as a local example, I also looked up the Rome Open Data website. They have lots of interesting information out there, but most of it is CSV data. So for integration purposes, I kind of stuck with my New York data. But let's see how you actually go about building apps. So this is the site that I've just shown you. It gives you information about how many rows, frequency of updates, what kind of data you find. And you can actually drill into the data and look at it. And this data is provided by a company called Socrata. There are many different providers that do this. This is just one company that is helping or working with cities and states to take all the data and make it available online in a specific format in a specific REST API. And this particular one, Socrata Open Data API, works very well with Apex because it has an easy URL and it allows a lot of filtering and querying through the URL, which makes it easy to integrate with Apex. Now, what you need when you want to build an application on a REST API in general is an endpoint, a URL that points to that data source. So in my example, that's this URL over there. Now, with Socrata, the URLs typically look like this. So you have the domain, you have resource, you have this kind of a code. So what you're looking for is anything that ends with .json. And once you have that, you can plug that into Apex or any other tool for that matter. In fact, let me show you an example. You can take this and just load it into something like POR. POR is a REST client that you can look at JSON data in a more structured manner than in Chrome. All right, so I have that. I have the URL. I know how to get to my data. But what can I do to filter my data? And that's where this so the API comes in. You see the code there in red. That's one specific school. So I can very easily filter down to one specific school and look at that. Oops. I lost my filter. Well, it doesn't come along. Anyhow, that's how you would get to a different specific school. And you can also use all these attributes to select specific columns and to apply where clauses, order by, group by. And that means that all of these clauses are going to be applied at the server side of that API. So if you look at 1 million rows, you don't want to pull in 1 million rows into your own application. So you can pre-select data through this syntax. So here's an example. This gives me, out of all these thousands of rows and record sets, gives me the 5-year trend of New York City school demographics, simply by selecting specific columns and then applying a group by and order by year. And that's what that result would look like. All right, so very useful API. And now I want to take this API, plug it into my application, and integrate that data with all my other school data. All right, so this is the URL that I'm after. And going back into Apex. So this is the school application that you've seen. And so far I've been building applications on local tables, the tables that I already had, as well as the table that I created through a spreadsheet upload. Now I want to access remote data. Now I want to access this REST API. So for that we have what we call shared components. And down here you see data sources. And in this case you would need to create something we call a web source module. I'm going to hit create here. And really all I need at this point is just that URL endpoint. So I'm going to put that in here. And I'm going to call this mass results. And this is simple HTTP. If you want to get a little bit fancier, you can interface with Oracle REST data services. You can interface with Oracle Cloud Applications, which gives you more features. In this case, it's my Open Data API, which only lets me pull in data. But that is good enough for my purpose. So I'm going to hit next. So now Apex is going to look at this URL. It sees I already had a New York City Schools server before. So I'm looking at this URL path, which takes me to those test results. And now I don't need authentication. I could define authentication here, but this is all wide open. So let's hit discover. You know, Apex is reaching out to this REST API that I just loaded in my web browser, and it found these columns. So it looks pretty good. That looks kind of what I have over here, right? This is the kind of data that I'm looking to load. All right, let's create a web source. All right, so mass results. So this web source is available to me now as a data source, as if it were a local table. So when I go back to my wizards here, I can invoke this create page wizard, and I can now create a report. Let's do an interactive report on my mass results. And then I can make a few selections about the navigation. Do I want to have it in the menu? But here comes the interesting part. So at this point, I can now choose to build a report on a local data source, on a REST-enabled SQL source, or in my case, a web source. And the web source module is mass results. And again, Apex is reaching out to this API, pulling in the columns from my web source definition. And then I'm ready to create this. All right, so now when you go back to the application that we were working on before, when you just reload it, there's a new entry here, mass results. And when I click on this, I see all the results coming from this API. And this is in real time. This is coming directly as I load this from this API. When looking at this, this is all very nice and useful. I do want to limit it a little bit, though, because, I know that I'm only interested in last year's results, or 2017. I also know that I only want to have all students. I'm not really interested in specific grades. So I'm going back here to my web source module. And I'm going to edit this. And you've seen me kind of add these little attributes to the URLs before, right? I can do the same thing here. I can add parameters. And when I add a parameter called query string, that means that parameter is going to be added to the end of that REST endpoint. And I'm going to do a $limit. this ensures that I'm actually getting 10,000 rows. By default, I'm only getting 1,000 rows, but I want to have more. So I'm going to add this. I also want to have, for the grade, I want to have all grades. And then lastly, for the year, I want to have 2017. All right. So now I have my web source limited to only 2017, getting all grades, and 10,000 rows. Let's hit apply changes. And let's run this again. All right, that looks like something that I can use. Now I know there's some information in there that I don't really care about. So this is UI. I can just remove all these different levels and all these too. What I'm really after is level 3, 4, and then the school name and such. So what this combination here, level 3, 4, that gives me the percentage of school children who are considered proficient in math. So level 1 is the worst, level 4 is the best, and the combination of 3 and 4, that means they are proficient. So some of these schools clearly are not very proficient. So let's move this down. All right. All right, so now I have a more usable report on the REST APIs. And now I want to bring it all together, right? I had my spreadsheet data, I had my local data, and now I want to combine it all. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go back to Page Designer. I'm going to go here to Math Results. And this is REST API, right? The data is provided in JSON format. The data looks like this. So not that easy to combine necessarily with my SQL-based data. But what Apex is actually doing for you, it's wrapping this JSON data feed into a SQL query. So when you go to local post-processing, you get this. And that's a standard SQL query that actually exposes each column or each attribute in this JSON feed as columns in a SQL query. And then it is loading that data from Apex $source data. So now I actually can merge in data from other tables. And I prepared that a little bit ahead of time. So I'm going to just take this query here and put that in here. And what you see, I'm now loading from my middle schools directory and from Apex source data. I'm linking the two through the school DBN. That's the number of the school. And then everything starting with S, that's coming from my middle school table. And everything down here starting with T, that's coming from my REST API. Gonna hit OK. Gonna save this. Gonna run it. All right, so now I have a report that gives me the schools, links to the schools, phone numbers, all kind of information, as well as all the scores that I'm really interested in. So let's sort this a little bit, move this to the back, make it more readable. All right, that looks nicer. And now I can go back and, let's say, look at the schools in my district. And now I can actually sort by and look at which are the best performing schools. All right, so 79% proficient in math. That seems to be a good candidate to pick. All right, so just to recap, so I started out with building an application on data local in my database, data that I already had there before. Then I used our data load wizard to upload a spreadsheet. You can upload Excel files, native Excel files, CSV files. You can actually point to remote data sources, so a variety of different ways to get data in. And in doing so, I created another table. Then I combined the data in this middle school view over here. And then the last step that I did, I included some REST API. In this case, it's like 2017 data, but it could as well be real-time data that I would just pull in as needed. And then I merged this REST data, JSON-based data, with a local table through our SQL way of exposing this JSON data feed. All right, and that brings me to a little bit of a recap of links. So if you want to learn more about Apex, apexoracle.com. That's the site where I built all of this, and you can create a free workspace there. Just try it all out. /shortcuts gets you to a page with lots of interesting links to learn more. And I listed a few here. OTN is where you download Apex. Apex Community shows you a lot of customer references and success stories. Learning Library has videos and material to kind of learn Apex. And then cloudoracle.com database is where you can sign up for a cloud service. And then last point on my list, if you're interested in building apps on REST APIs and open data, last year I wrote this article for InfoQ that talks about that in a lot more detail. What is government open data, how you can interface with that data, and how you can integrate it in Apex. All right, that's all I have. Thank you very much.